There's a question of who is to blame for the trouble in the southern West Virginia coal fields, but there is no question that people are being hurt with disturbing frequency. The gate pickets are peaceful, but the truckers are finding their vehicles targets for snipers in the heavily wooded areas of Kentucky and West Virginia where they travel. The UMW and the AT Massey Coal Group have been engaged in a bitter labor dispute since last October. Most of the union's actions over the past few weeks have been nonviolent, but that changed this week when the company stepped up coal shipments from Kentucky. Thursday, non-union coal trucks smashed through a UMW blockade. They smashed into miners' cars. The miners retaliated by throwing rocks and burning a company truck. UMW President Rich Trumpka charged the company with engaging in violent tactics that endanger lives and property. Company officials called strikers a mob of UMW thugs. Union Vice President Cecil Roberts says the strikers' reaction to the trucks is understandable.
No one anywhere is going to stand by while people try to kill them or run over them and destroy their property.
The increasingly bitter strike against the AT Massey Coal Group and a few other mines involves about 2,500 miners. Most of them work in West Virginia and Kentucky. Bob Aaron, WCHS-TV, News 8, Pike County, Kentucky.
Say, hey, Mr. Massey, no, you ain't gonna run no coal. No, you ain't gonna run any coal here today. Well, the union, as you know, has come a long, long way. And those old scat truckers that you hired are not gonna stand in our way. Say, hey, Mr. Massey, no, you ain't gonna run today. No, you ain't gonna run any coal here today. Well, you're trying to split our brothers up and have the things your way. We tell you now, it's not gonna work. The union is here to stay.
All right, my name is Fritz McLinden. This is The State Between Us. We are continuing our focus on this podcast on labor and, on the, let's say, reaction to the organization of labor, the quote-unquote threat of socialism in the United States of America, the Long Red Scare. And we covered last week a very strange May Day in Massey, Wisconsin, where the American Legion, the sort of historical strike breakers of note and repute, by the time the 50s rolls around, that had been sort of outsourced to a lot of different groups. They were more doing organizing and things like that, but they went ahead and organized a crazy Soviet takeover of a small town in Wisconsin. And this was sort of part of the larger Red Scare propaganda efforts. So today, we're jumping forward in history a couple decades, and we're seeing a right wing in America that is a little too comfortable at that point with their Red Scare related responses. And we're looking specifically at a part of the country which has a very long history of violent labor disputes, of interventions on the part of federal forces, private militaries, quote unquote detective agencies, things like that. And I'm joined here today by labor historian Ashley Nguyen, who works out of the University of Maryland and has been working on a pretty unknown incident of extraordinary violence, class warfare in the truest sense of the word in West Virginia. So maybe Ashley, say hello, tell us a couple things about yourself, how you got interested in this particular event. And then I'm going to give a little bit of sort of a historical background on this area and let you take us through this. I don't know what to call it. You know what? It's Amy Césaire. This is just like imperialism at home type shit, isn't it? We're talking about.
Yes, exactly. Actually, I think that's probably a better analytic than Foucault's imperial boomerang, which has kind of been making its rounds lately.
It's boomeranging back again, is it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not gonna shit on Foucault either. On this podcast, I'll take what I can get. But yeah, labor counterinsurgency. Tell me, tell us about yourself and how you got into this.
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name's Ashley. Thank you, Fritz, for having me on. I'm a labor historian, and I currently am a grad worker at the University of Maryland. And my project here is about a coal miner strike that happens in 1984 that really kind of shifted the way that I understood labor history, especially during this time. And I guess kind of my background, I started getting really interested in labor in undergrad. I worked in a couple of like labor organizing related fields. I was a labor organizer with a faculty union in Florida for a little while before I came to grad school, and am still quite involved in a lot of union stuff. And part of my interests have always been anchored to the question of why the strike has really for a while there faded out of the toolbox of American unions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that was a really central question that had never left my mind throughout my first couple years of grad school when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to base my dissertation on.
Yeah.
And then a host of other factors also put this project right in front of me. At the time, I was having discussions with labor historians, my dissertation committee, who were saying that there really needs to be a rethinking of neoliberal historiography that is really based on labor, because we don't really have a coherent picture of how neoliberalization has impacted the ways that workers are able to organize, especially in the United States. So that was one factor that kind of led me to this project. The other one was I was looking for some kind of inspiration that would help me think through how to build a militant union culture.
Sure.
And at least in the United States, there really is no union culture as militant as the coal miners.
Okay, but listen,
truly,
that's a very high standard historically speaking. I mean, coal miners in the U.S., they really, I wasn't joking when I say class warfare. It really put the emphasis on warfare on some of these guys.
Yeah,
back in the day.
100%. And so that's kind of the reason why I arrived at this project. It was really important to me that I stay true to how these, people on strike were narrativizing their conflict, and historians, scholarships, all coal miners alike have repeatedly and consistently narrativized the struggle in the coal mines as warfare.
Yeah.
And so by kind of taking that warfare martial character of how they're describing their conflict, I kind of landed on, after reading a bunch of stuff on counterinsurgency, I was wait a minute, this feels it looks like a counterinsurgency operation.
Yeah, for real.
And so a part of the project is to figure out is this a real historical moment for counterinsurgency, or is counterinsurgency just going to have to be applied as an overall analytic? And I think that one of the contributions of this project to the broader historiography is to understand counterinsurgency as the policing mechanism of workers throughout that develops throughout the Cold War, and then just kind of becomes the logic of disciplining labor.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a very important theme for this show. We haven't really looked at it in as direct a way as we're going to look at it today, in the sense of direct violence. We have talked a lot about the broad-reaching efforts to disempower workers, to eliminate them from the roles of potential hirees, to starve them just by using the structures of capitalism and the sort of private police powers of investigative groups. Yeah, this is well in line with that. And if you think about what counterinsurgency means, it's easy to think just about the Contras, but we got to remember that the Contra field manual was all about hearts and minds, and education and propaganda and that sort of thing. So really, I think you found a gem here. You might call it a blood diamond of some kind. And blood coal. That's what we got. That's just coal. We just we forget. And so thanks for coming on here to help us recover some of these intentionally maybe forgotten stories of how we've resisted in our various iterations over time. And I think maybe the best thing to do would just be to introduce people to this area in West Virginia. So I have to just say on the outset, this is one of my favorite parts of the United States.
Me too.
Oh man, it's gorgeous.
Yes.
People are pretty chill. It's not looking good out there, economically speaking. It's real rough, and it's if you have any interest in the history of American industrial capitalism, this place is just, the entire region is like a museum. You could still find old Ford-owned company towns. You know, you might get lucky and pick scrip off the ground in some of these places. But I think it really struck me that our story today is taking place in, right on the West Virginia-Kentucky border. What's that river called there? Tug Fork. Yes.
Yes.
And this has historically been, a very large area for mining. And because of that, it has been a center of immigration. It's been a center of racial struggles in the U.S. as well, among other things. And perhaps most famously, if you're one of us kind of nerds, would be the mining wars that went on kind of continuously, honestly, for decades. But I think the most famous one would be the Battle of Blair Hill. This happened in Matewan, West Virginia, right there on the Kentucky border. This is Hatfield-McCoy territory. And in 1920, back in the day, there was a strike unfurling with the help of the agitator Mother Jones and the IWW, etc. This grew. This is a very, very short story I'm telling here, but this grew into open warfare between the private detective agency Baldwin Felts, who had come to break the workers. There was what the Baldwin Felts detective agency calls a massacre, what the workers call a victory, where a bunch of them got took out. And this ended in like a straight up battle in the field. This was considered one of the largest armed conflicts inside of U.S. territory since the Civil War. And it resulted in one of the first aerial bombings of U.S. citizens by U.S. powers. In this case, these were, I think, privately owned planes, but in a sort of repetition of what happened that very same year, contemporaneously almost, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, during the Tulsa massacre, where where flights were sent over carrying dynamite, which was then dropped onto people. So these sorts of tactics were developing simultaneously on both race and class fronts, which of course are not necessarily separable, but we see a larger theme of strikebreakers, of racist agitators, etc., committing to open organized violence. And at least in Matewan, they were met with organized violence as well in defense. And so it kind of blows my mind that this is going to happen again in 1984. Again, this area will become the site of battle. And again, they're going to pull out the fucking, what's that armored train? It's the Bull Moose Special, I think, makes an appearance in both stories, which is crazy to me. An armored train that was named after somebody that was close to Teddy Roosevelt, whatever, was a big part of the original Battle of Matewan. And I think in this ridiculous Soldier of Fortune article you sent me, I think they said that it was used again in 84. So just to let the listener know, this is a very interesting site. It's also a very interesting site for people who are interested in socialism, in the study of socialism as a political movement, because, you've got your 1920s version where you've got straight up radicals, talking about socialist politics, but then jump to 1984, and Ashley's going to tell us about what happens there. But you've got a lot of anti-socialist sentiment already well developed, over the last, 50 years of Cold War or whatever, 40. All that's going to be also in the background. So one more thing, just about mining itself. Mining itself has long been a very deadly and dangerous industry. In the 20s, you're looking at like a 10-year period where 4,000 workers would die just in the mines alone. So there's a lot of ways to disappear a union man around these parts. You know what I mean? There's a lot of death involved in this industry. So I guess that's my intro. Yay.
Beautiful intro.
So let's pick up maybe a little bit on this kind of labor politics front in what you have here called the long 1970s, which we are more or less familiar with on this show as a moment when the right had sort of started kind of on the back foot, but then were able to reconstitute themselves in a really powerful way. Of course, Nixon and Reagan being very good friends of some of the worst people in the world.
One of some of the most awful people on earth. So I guess the way that I approach this project kind of starts with a really like broad context of the 1970s. Historians have categorized it as like the long 1970s, which probably like the latter half of the 60s up until like 81. So the long 1970s, this is, for labor historians, kind of recognized as the decade of the rank and file, which means that a lot of union direction strategy is being kind of like controlled and directed by rank and file, just regular members who aren't, in like kind of the political malaise of union leadership. So workers are agitating in so many sectors of the economy, especially the really big industries that like undergird basically the entire US economy, like auto workers, construction working, mining. And then you also have this burgeoning or like explosiveness in service sector organizing and other types of work that aren't technically like the industry as we knew it, or as we kind of like to romanticize. So teachers, clerical workers, nurses, and flight attendants and communications workers are also really involved in contributing to the like really big rise in the number of concerted worker action throughout the 1970s. And I think one of the contributing factors to this rise of rank and file militancy is a reaction to how the New Deal approaches labor conflict. And I think that especially when you talk to coal miners, they really see the New Deal as something that is trying to take the fight off of the work site and encasing it within the courts.
And that is why we need federal legislation to deal with this, because it cannot be accomplished politically on its own.
Morgan Massey would like to be able to federally prosecute striking miners he blames for injuring 75 of his workers, destroying more than 170 vehicles, and slashing nearly 1,700 truck tires.
So, like, for example, in some of these interviews with the coal miners involved in the Massey strike in 1984, they really say things like, oh, I would love it if the NLRB could disappear and we could just take the fight back to the work site, and like the power of the union is in the strike. And so, in trying to, the New Deal's like creation of the NLRB, in trying to encase the struggle for like labor into the courts, like coal miners really kind of see that as one of the ways that the power of the strike is broken, which I thought was a really, really interesting point. And so, of course, with every kind of, like any spike in labor militancy, there's going to be reactionary forces. And this time, I think that these reactionary forces are kind of like, it's like the start of neoliberalism. And I think that we'd like to think about Reagan as the father of neoliberalism in America, but it really starts with Jimmy Carter.
Interesting. Yeah, explain.
Yeah. And so Jimmy Carter really like is not the world's most labor-friendly guy. For example,
wait, that can't be right. That can't be right. He was a U.S. president. He's supposed to be, isn't he the friend of the people? The peanut farmer?
You would think. I think that whoever did his PR, like, it did a real number.
I think it's just, just comparing, I mean, listen, you don't need a lot of PR if you're sandwiched between Nixon and Reagan. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can be pretty terrible and still come out looking okay.
You know what the right-wingers like to say, though? They do like to say that Reagan is the only president who has ever been a part of a union.
Oh, God. Oh,
which is
God.
like kind of true, but like whatever.
Yeah, I know that even the John Birch Society at one point didn't trust him because of that, but they got over it really fast.
Yeah. And so what was I talking? Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter kind of being the guy that lays the groundwork for Reagan to really entrench neoliberalism in American policy. And I guess like the most relevant example that I can think of that concerns the mine workers is this kind of really big strike with the UMWA, the United Mine Workers of America, in 1977.
Yeah.
That Carter breaks that strike using the Taft-Hartley Act.
Yes.
Or Taft-Hartley.
There it is. It felt right to me too. Yeah.
So at least for coal miners, they really see like there's no friend to labor.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of gets worse and worse.
Yeah.
Right after Jimmy Carter's presidency. And so all of these kinds of reactionary forces, you see a lot of like anti-labor injunctions in the courts. Thousands of arrests are made throughout the decade. There's a concerted movement from the right to curtail the power of the strike even further. Yeah. And this is also the time when what we know as labor management consulting as an industry like is really exploding.
Oh, interesting. That's very interesting. That does tie back to some of because the idea of labor management as a kind of a special class of expert knowledge probably begins in those NAM circles, maybe 50 years before. But so at this point, we're talking about like a fully matured system of producing these kinds of experts that probably have more connections to political power than they did before, I'm guessing as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. I mean, not cool, but
like
I'm into the story.
The private security guy.
Yeah.
The private security firm that is hired by Massey to break this strike. The head of the founder of this firm was a former Secret Service agent for President Ford.
That rules.
And yeah, he had married one of Ford's daughters. And to me, the private security firm project that he founded just kind of looks like a post-divorce, like sad project to distract him from how horrible his life is. But anyway, so this kind of growth in the labor management consulting industry, I hesitate to say mature because this industry is always going to have to like learn and rethink its strategies in response to how labor is organizing. Yeah. But the power dynamics, especially in the courts, are absolutely on their side.
Sure.
So this is also all coming off of the decade of the civil rights, the Black Power movement, and Black Panthers, a huge amount of like radical organizing.
Yeah.
And
peak Cold War.
People are scared. Yeah. People are like, what the fuck is going on? They're kind of watching all of this stuff happening on their TVs and they're like, an urban riot? What's going on over there? Mm-hmm. And so they see a lot of like, there's a lot of, I don't want to say the word militarization yet because I think it might kind of give the wrong idea, but this is like a process where the United States police forces, law enforcement, and especially private security are taking on more of a martial character, especially in public.
They like to call it modernizing.
In like the modern sense.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Modernization of the police is usually what the sort of general historical terms that I've heard are called. Where they stopped just being where they stopped dressing and acting like they were just basically gangsters, and started to pretend to be soldiers instead.
Yes, and so the other part of this is that American jobs are heavily impacted by neoliberalism, but there wasn't like a super cohesive way to explain it yet, or I guess there wasn't like a real analytical framework to explain it yet. But American workers are seeing their jobs being offshored. Entire communities, especially in the South, are just completely shuttering because jobs are moving out of the United States.
Yeah.
And these are all projects that Carter and Reagan are either implicitly or explicitly supporting.
Yeah. And keep in mind as well, listener, that we're talking about maybe, I don't know if this is peak or this is average, but we're talking about a period of Cold War imperialism as well, where a lot of these jobs are probably disappearing because a bunch of mine workers got their faces peeled off in Latin America, like some strike gets broken in Chile, and that's going to have repercussions up in the US.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess the other really important dynamic is, like you bring up, the Cold War dynamic. And what I'm particularly interested in is the Second Cold War, dun, dun, dun. Which is kind of when everybody turns away from Nixon's idea of détente. And it allows Reagan to take a renewed hardline American stance against the USSR.
Yeah.
And so a part of that hardline fight, which I will say, counterinsurgency kind of starts off as one of Kennedy's like pet projects because it's supposed to be a quote unquote more humane way
right.
of being a horrible anti-communist military force.
We prefer the term hearts and minds.
Yeah. And so it like counterinsurgency is a liberal project. How it's defined, especially in the Cold War era, at least in like the history of how scholars have spoken about counterinsurgency in America, you can probably date it all the way back into like the quote unquote Indian Wars. But like the trajectory of how counterinsurgency is understood is that by the time the Cold War rolls around, it takes on this very anti-communist nature, which is how we understand counterinsurgency today.
Sure.
But that's still all to say counterinsurgency as defined by the U.S. military, and especially now disgraced General David Petraeus, is a super, super capacious term. Literally, it can refer to any tactic in the toolbox that is meant to fight quote unquote irregular forces.
Right.
So insurgencies are defined in such a broad way that counterinsurgency, at least as like a historical interrogation, people are starting to be like, wait, what does counterinsurgency actually mean? If it looks like this abroad, but it also looks like, XYZ in the United States. This can't possibly be just a thing that exists in the third world. And so I guess this is kind of where like the imperial boomerang analytic really like piqued my interest. And I get there are like four-ish really big books that influence the way that I was thinking about this project. Should I mention them, or is that a little bit too?
Yeah, please mention them. We like books here.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess my first encounter with the idea of counterinsurgency as a domestic phenomenon is through Orasami Burton's book Tip of the Spear, which looks at counterinsurgency as an analytic and argues that the military industrial complex worked alongside the carceral system to suppress political dissidents throughout the 70s. And so to understand like the prison as a tool of counterinsurgency, of population management, I thought was something that was like super, super interesting, and just kind of led me to other books that were arguing like, hey, counterinsurgency actually was a huge project in the United States, even though we don't really describe it as such.
Right.
Right. And then Jordan T. Camp's Incarcerating the Crisis kind of puts all of that into the context of the 1970s and the crisis of at the beginning of the rise of neoliberalism. And there's some discussion of how counterinsurgency is used against the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement, which, if readers don't know, this was kind of like an explicitly radical union movement that happened around the auto industry in Detroit, I think, is where the movement is anchored. And then one of the really like key pillars that a lot of my research rests upon is Stuart Schrader's Badges Without Borders, which is a very, very extensive look about how American police are trained and kind of like come into modernization by the same people who are training counterinsurgency forces abroad.
I mean, when you say it out loud, it sounds like the most obvious thing in the world. It's just somebody's got to say it out loud to you. And as soon as you do it, you can't not see it anymore. I mean, we've gotten probably, in the Anglophonic left, used to hearing about cross trainings with the New York police, for instance, with the IDF and stuff like this. But in fact, this is a lot deeper. Cross trainings tend to be global. They are often backed by, well, were in the past at least, supported by like the State Department. And yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all to learn that these like absolute psychos doing counterinsurgency against communism in wherever, South and Central America, for instance, that they'd be part of this enormous mess.
It's like, it's all the same, like, evil guys who they all know each other and they all talk about these things.
Yes.
Like, I think one thing that is actually kind of relevant and interesting, it's a thread that I haven't been able to figure out exactly how that plays into my dissertation, but...
Oh, please tell me.
The same guy who basically oversaw all of the prison operations during Operation Phoenix was at San Quentin when the CIA was doing MK Ultra.
No, fuck
and then
off.
Also, he became the prison warden for the West Virginia State Penitentiary. And there's a whole documentary about how fucking psychotic this guy is. And because it's like taking place in West Virginia, I am picking at threads right now to see like what's the connection here. There has to be like a labor connection if he's being brought here.
I mean, damn, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. What lore you bring here? These are quality villains you've got on the list today.
Yeah, if you're interested, his name is Donald Bordenkircher, and if anybody wants to like, kind of pick at that a little bit more, I would love to collaborate.
Donald Bordenkircher.
But really, really like interesting, just complete ghouls.
Why am I so happy about this? There's something wrong. You give me a story like this, and I feel like I should be saying like, oh no, that's so, but really I'm just excited.
I mean, I think it's exciting because these are things that like the state doesn't want you to know.
Yes, that's right.
Right?
They're dirty secrets. Yeah.
And it's like, it's in our interest to know. So, I mean,
that's true. It's so
still
you're saying
morbid, but it feels like, we're accomplishing something by figuring out things that we're not meant to know.
So you're saying that we're not like psychologically maladapted. We're heroes of some kind.
Sure, we can go with that.
Okay, thank you. I will, yeah.
Okay.
So counterinsurgency doctrine as a method for police training, this is really like a huge 1960s project. And essentially, it's the same personnel who are kind of directing the trajectory of how modern police forces are developing as like institutions. And so that kind of, I hope that sets the scene for the strike.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
I'm like fully expecting John Singlaub to just show up for no reason at all.
Honestly, wasn't he involved in Soldier of Fortune? Like he had Soldier of Fortune put out the ads to recruit American like losers to go fight as counterinsurgents.
Yes. Yeah. He might have been
so like I'm
busy.
so totally sure he's aware of all of this.
Yeah. Oh, these bastards. All right, so let's talk about the miners.
Yeah. American coal miners are probably some of the most militant sections of the working class. They narrativize their struggle as warfare, and so this project really wants to stay true to how they conceive the struggle.
Yeah.
And honestly, from the other side of the picket line as well, Donald Blankenship, who is the CEO, who ends up being the CEO of Massey after the 1984 strike repeatedly describes mine workers who are like union members as quote unquote union terrorism. And this kind of language is so ubiquitous in how private security and law enforcement understood the labor struggle that there was no way of escaping narrating the strike as a battle in the longer protracted war that is like the mine wars.
Yeah. Yes.
And I guess where my project kind of anchors the beginning of the timeline is out of this 1970s rank and file movement. And the UMWA, their part in this rank and file movement is encapsulated in the Miners for Democracy movement, MFD.
Okay.
This was kind of like a reform caucus of the UMWA. For a while, I think that the rank and file membership had seen union leadership make decisions that were not entirely democratic, not entirely taking into account the will of just rank and file members. And so, especially after the murder of Yablonsky in the 70s, the Miners for Democracy movement is formed to force UMWA leadership to adhere to certain democratic standards of how union decisions are made. And so, like, they achieve a lot of really important things, like a lot more attention on the occupational hazards of coal mining, black lung being one of them.
Yeah.
Some of the MFD people end up in UMWA leadership. And so a part of my project's interrogation is to see, how does a democratic movement for rank and file control impact the ways that a strike is carried out? And maybe this is to my own detriment, but I'm also very, very interested in particular conflicts between your parent union and rank and file. I think that sometimes, and other labor historians have kind of like pushed me in this direction. Mm-hmm. There needs to be a little bit more of a focus on like how leadership and rank and file think of the struggle, because it's often very different strategically, very different ideologically. Yeah. And like those struggles are like a really key way of understanding how to move a union forward for my purposes towards the left.
Yes. Yeah. I think you can think about these things too in larger scales as well. For instance, like the relationship that maybe the AFL, or Gompers, mm-hmm. these people had with the state relative, compared to what the IWW's relationship would have been mm-hmm. when they were coexisting, that there is like this, the idea of the need for management, the idea of the need for like diplomatic expertise and experts and things like this. Yeah, I'm with you. Yes. Wildcat all the way is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, 100%. Honestly, in speaking to people who have been on wildcat strikes, I learned the most about how to like organize an effective labor union.
Ooh, yes, and also where all the little soft spots are too in the sort of mm-hmm. capitalist networks of value creation, like where you can really gum it up real fast. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It takes so little sometimes. It's
Wildcat
crazy.
forever.
Yeah, Wildcat forever.
So I guess at this point, I kind of want to set a little bit of the scene of what the coal industry looked like by 1984. Like I said, the Second Cold War is this moment of Reagan really like sticking his heels in the sand and saying like, no, we are not acquiescing to any kind of détente or peaceful resolution with the USSR.
I will end this planet.
Yeah, no, quite literally.
Yes.
I will push the button.
Yes. Yes.
So one of the entry points of my dissertation into broader historiography of the Second Cold War is through energy imperialism.
Great.
Carter has like 2 oil crises that yeah. he has to deal with because OPEC countries are now being like, wait a minute, we want to control our resources. And so energy independence is a really, really huge deal to both Carter and Reagan because of the rise of OPEC and like just a lot of like shifting dynamics within energy infrastructure, especially as environmentalists are starting to agitate towards more clean sources of energy.
Yeah.
And so what this kind of like preoccupation with energy independence looks like for Carter is making sure, just like during World War II, making sure that the state is able to minimize as many disruptions to energy supply chains as possible.
Sure. Yeah.
And so this disruption to any presidential administration is epitomized in the strike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can call it a national security issue, and then if you start calling people terrorists during a national security crisis, you can kind of do what you want with them.
Exactly. And so Carter kind of like, I don't want to say set the precedent, but the big thing that he does that's relevant to this project is using Taft-Hartley to break the 1977 UMWA strike, which at the time was the longest coal strike in the union's history.
Ah, really? Okay.
Yeah. And there's an obvious reason why that strike was launched at that time. And I think that a part of the reason why it was launched at that time was because they knew there was some political leverage from the rise of OPEC. So like all of these imperial dynamics are folding into it. Fast forward a little bit to Reagan. And I think a lot of labor historians kind of anchor this point to his breaking of the 1981 PATCO strike.
Yeah, I thought you were going to go with the air traffic controllers.
Yeah, PATCO air traffic controller strike.
Oh, I heard Packers, like meat packers.
Oh, sorry. No, I meant PATCO.
Yeah, gotcha. Yes, exactly. This was momentous, and this had shock sent all around the world. I mean, it also resulted in a lot of other ATC groups, not even connected, also suffering now these similar rules. Like neoliberalism has always been a global effort.
And when you look at documents from the Reagan Presidential Library about how they're thinking about energy and energy independence, there's a huge, like, obvious emphasis on like the free market. And he kind of like
sorry, I just flash forward to fucking goons with sniper rifles firing at workers. But yeah, go on. Free market.
That's your freedom.
That's your freedom. You're welcome.
Reagan's administration emphasizes like the free market, and obviously a lot of anti-union labor sentiment and labor action is suppressed by Reagan. And how this manifests on the ground in the coal industry is probably best illustrated by the actions of Massey Coal, which is the boss during the strike.
Yeah, our villain for the day.
Yeah, the villain of the day. So Massey Coal, huge coal company, I don't remember which decade, I want to say like the 70s, releases this document or memorandum about their union busting strategies. In 1946-ish, the UMWA was able to like leverage all of their power and kind of came to the table with the National BCOA, which is like the big coal operators agreement that says that one, there's going to be a per ton royalty that the BCOA companies pay into to provide a pension and healthcare fund for the UMWA, which by some historical accounts is like the most robust union provided like pension and healthcare fund like literally ever. So it's a really, really big part that plays into like meaning making for coal miners in the union.
Right. Yeah.
And so a part of the calculation that goes into why union members are so militant about protecting the right to strike is fundamentally tied to the UMWA Health and Retirement Fund. And one of the ways that Massey was like working to break the power of the union in West Virginia is to have individual companies or subsidiaries under Massey not sign on to the national BCOA. And by not signing on to the national BCOA means that you no longer have to pay for these kinds of like whatever socialist funds for workers' health.
Right.
And the second kind of issue in the coal industry at this time is just the nature of coal mining itself. You can really only mine coal from a coal mine for maybe 7 years max before it's either too unsafe to keep mining or you just mined out all of the coal.
Yeah.
And once you mine the coal, the way that the contracts were set up, these companies could just let all of these coal miners go without having to rehire the same coal miners back once they open a new coal mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so job security and panel rights, which is
What's that?
the right to be panel rights, I think are a pretty, it's not like a well thought out legal concept, I don't think, at least from what I've been able to find. But panel rights are essentially the right for you to be rehired after one subsidiary closes because of whatever reasons.
Okay.
And so a big part of like why people were so worked up during the strike is because coal miners they were fighting for job security. Like these were families who had worked in the mines for generations, and once the mines were mined out and they were let go, it was really, really hard to find other work, even if your boss was just opening another mine like a couple 100 miles down the road.
Sure.
So this is something like, especially on the Kentucky side, was impacting, I think, by estimates, up to like 5,000 families.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. And I think probably this is also in aid to the classic divide and conquer and alienation sort of strategies of capital that they've been developing for a long time at this point. We mentioned Taft-Hartley Act. I think one of the most important provisions there was their provisions against the closed shop. And that part of that is alienating workers from the expertise of other workers, from developing long-term bonds. So there are tactical reasons for doing it this way from the boss's perspective, where, yeah, if you close a subsidiary, that gives you a really good excuse to mix them all up again. You know what I mean? This is beyond coal mining, of course, but just to say this is some more fuckery.
One more dimension of the fuckery. One
fun new dimension, yes.
So Eastern coal was slowly shifting its way towards the West, where like the militant union culture didn't exist. And so by shifting coal mining outfits out to the West, it was another way of bolstering profits without having to deal with the union. So coal miners in the East were watching all of their jobs being shifted out West, or, interestingly, to South Africa.
Why should it matter to American coal miners what happens in South Africa?
The American coal miners have been subjected to large wage cuts, layoffs, concessions, and finally, complete shutdown of their operations here. They've been subjected to long strikes, and the company has not given in return. They have had to be the ones who give concessions. They should ask themselves, why? Why are the companies still able to operate? Why are the companies able to take cutbacks from them, lay them off, and shut down, and still survive? Where do these American jobs go to? Where do the companies get their profits from after all this has happened to the coal mine worker here? The corporations transport all the jobs to South Africa. In South Africa, they can then profit from slave labor conditions. They don't have to pay the wages that they pay the American worker. They don't have to pay Social Security. And they can then ship back the coal that they have mined from South Africa and sell it to the American consumer.
So these are kind of the conditions that the strikers are super, super aware of as they're entering this conflict. And I think here may be a good time to talk about two of the central figures to this strike. One being Donald Blankenship, or actually there's three that I think are important to know. Donald Blankenship, who at the start of the strike is in the C-suite for Rawl subsidiary, which is one of the profitable coal mining outfits under Massey.
Okay.
This guy, he's still around today. I would say he's like an extremely cartoonish dude, kind of like the Monopoly man of West Virginia.
Yes.
If you've heard the term Cocaine Mitch, he's the guy who describes Mitch McConnell as Cocaine Mitch.
Yes. Thank you, Dawn, for at least that.
I love it when my enemies fight. Yeah. And to him, in some of the interviews that, like, there's a documentary that's made about this strike that interviews Blankenship. He explicitly says, this is union terrorism. You have to understand that everything in America functions under capitalism, and there's no reason for me to sacrifice profit.
Damn.
This area has a history of union.
Sure does.
That, right? Of union activity. We'll call it that.
Yeah. Union terrorism.
Is that the way you see it?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
How do you, if you look at the history of Matewan around here, what's your perspective on that?
You know, I know the history of the Matewan massacre and the Hatfield-McCoy feud and all that kind of violence. And I think it's time that we were ashamed that they've occurred here instead of proud of it. And the only thing that I can say about that is not conducive to good business climate.
That history also has a certain aspect of corporate violence too to it, right?
It's my understanding that, you know, the companies were, you know, at fault in the 1920s and 1910s, and I'm sure they were. And I think for anyone to say anything different, that there might have been two sides to the issue then, would be sacrilegious today, because nobody seems to have the audacity or the nerve to say that there might have been two sides to the issue then. That's one thing, but when you have a union that will literally destroy a company that doesn't do exactly what it wants to do, that's another thing. And a lot of people think we're anti-union, and a lot of people particularly think I'm anti-union. I'm not. But the only thing is, I am anti-terrorism. And when you start committing terrorism, it's not going to lead to anything good for either party.
So, yeah, it's like, there's no subtlety to this guy. He's very cartoonish. He's not really like he's not very suave about it. He's also like a guy in West Virginia who, like, if you say his name to any West Virginian, immediately there's some kind of reaction. It's never neutral. Okay. And I think in a couple of articles, he's described himself as the most hated man in West Virginia, and he's a little bit too loud about that, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the two other guys, the head of Vance Security Asset Protection Team, which is the labor management arm of Vance International, founded by Charles Vance. And this company is kind of the hired private security company for breaking the strike, and they'll play an even bigger role in the 1989 Pittston strike. And Charles Vance, Secret Service agent, has military experience, goes on after the strike to he writes textbooks about how to and conduct counterterrorism efforts, especially as they relate to like the Middle East.
Whoa, all right.
In the 90s, yeah.
Okay. So he's cutting his teeth on what would become Iraq war tactics, basically, here in West Virginia.
Yeah. And
wow.
When you like read accounts from both like the private security agents who are hired and read accounts from strikers on the ground, they really say like, why does this look like Central America during the strike? This reminds me of my experiences in Vietnam.
Could it be because you're pointing a gun at people? Is that why it feels familiar?
Gee, I wonder. And I guess it's like the journalism around this is also encasing the strike on those like martial terms.
Yeah.
So you got Charles Vance, and then president of UMWA, Richard Trumka, who I think is better known in labor history as the president of the AFL-CIO. Mm-hmm. He comes into his own as a lawyer, actually, which I thought was like interesting.
Yeah.
He becomes president of UMWA.
And if they can produce coal cheaper in South Africa with slave labor, they'll do that. We're not like them, a piece of paper and a balance sheet. The union, the United Mine Workers, exists in the hearts and in the minds of its members and their families. And all the money in the world will never eradicate that from our hearts and from our minds, and there will always, but always, be United Mine Workers in this country, because there will always be a need for us.
He has a lot to deal with as part of his mandate with his election. The UMWA Health and Retirement Fund by that time had undergone so many, for lack of a better word, structural adjustments.
Yeah. Attacks of attrition. These are intentional acts.
Yeah. There is like no point in any contract negotiation between UMWA and the BCOA that doesn't have to do with the Health and Retirement Fund.
Yeah, okay.
And so it's constantly under attack by the BCOA and the coal barons. And Trumka has this mandate of figuring out how to protect those benefits. And then on the other hand, he's also watching a lot of coal operations being shipped to South Africa and other countries where you can pay laborers basically slavery wages.
Right.
To mine coal for much cheaper. Like shipping out or like outsourcing the work and then shipping the coal back in for coal companies was just much cheaper than having to employ American labor. And so what kind of starts out as like an anti-apartheid project or like kind of interest for Trumka because of the interests of the union morphs into like a broader like cross-border worker solidarity kind of deal.
Okay.
And so I guess that like those are like the really three important guys that you should know about. Oh, and one other thing about Trumka. This is a little bit more of like my judgment on this is still up in the air because there's no quantifiable metric to figure out how workers thought about this pivot in strategy. But previous to 1984, coal strikes were like, it's not selective. You're not only striking at just a couple of really strategic mines. It's the whole industry.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Does that probably include secondary industries too, like rail and stuff like that? Well, I guess rail, maybe they couldn't at that point even. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember when like the Solidarity strike was banned. But
early. That was
but that doesn't stop other union members or from other unions like supporting the strike. Like during the Massey strike in 1984, there was a UAW caravan of like 500 union members who came in to help with the effort.
Right. Okay.
So this kind of pivot to the selective strike where rather than holding an industry-wide strike, you're only striking at particular mines that are deemed the most profitable. And the calculus behind this has to do with how much neoliberalism and its policies are squeezing the worker. Not everybody could afford to be on the picket line. And I think that the calculus was that if you pulled everybody off of the work site to strike, there was going to be too much retaliation, and like these coal miners who are already in such a precarious situation would not have been able to weather a national strike. And so the pivot to the selective strike, some members didn't agree. They thought the selective strike would kind of weaken the power of the strike. And some didn't contest the pivot and just did the best with what they had. So jury is still out, I think, for me on whether the selective strike was the best strategy pivot.
It's hard
you kind of got to adapt to what you're given, you know?
Exactly. It's hard to be too judgmental in a state of war like this as well. I mean, even if it is like a cold one in the sense of just small acts of attrition, of starving out, mutual aid relationships, like the undergirdings for a strike, they don't just happen in space. They happen because workers are part of society, you know? And then when you start chipping away at that society for decades, yeah, it's going to be a lot harder. You have to make these tactical decisions, and there's not going to be like a winning strategy, maybe, all the time. I think, whatever.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I don't think that any, like, when you debrief labor actions, and this is what I hear consistently from talking to workers who have been on strike, you don't really ask the question of whether the strike was successful or not.
Okay.
You analyze what you've been able to win, and then you talk about how to pivot strategy to demand more as you move on through the union organizing or contractual negotiation process.
Makes a lot of sense.
So yeah, I guess maybe we could get into the actual strike.
Yeah, indeed. So we got these subsidiaries of the larger Massey firm. They've been talking about strikes. They decide on a selective strike. And okay, what happens then?
So the strike kicks off October 1984 at a couple of really key sites on the border of Kentucky and West Virginia. And I think like the strikes or the work sites that were being struck were all within about like a 300-mile like distance from each other.
Look, if you're going to start a new mine war, where else would you pick? This is where you do that kind of thing.
And like I said before, the demands of the strike were for Massey to sign on to the BCOA because the BCOA is one, how you get access to healthcare and the pension, and then animal rights. No, exactly. How dare.
Clearly.
Dare to dream.
Right.
And the strategies and the tactics of the strike from both the strikers and like the anti-strike forces very much kind of align with what we understand as counterinsurgency.
Yes.
And I guess maybe like to the miners, they really saw this as like a two-part, like 2 stages to the strike. In an interview with the local union president at the time, he describes this kind of counterinsurgent operation as 2 phases. Phase 1, which he says was all about hearts and minds and smiles.
Yeah.
And this was like right up until they brought in van security, like actual forces on the ground.
Yeah.
And I saw, as I was doing all this talking, I saw a blue van go up a road. Well, I didn't pay any attention to that blue van. I thought I'd seen it earlier that day. Well, when I stepped back from the door and said, I looked at him and I said, Jim, you promised me now you'll stay awake. I said, I can go over and lay down and rest if you'll stay awake. And just as I said that, the blue van come back down the road when he shot. I heard 2 shots right at first, and I got one of the first shots, into this hand here. It threw me to the floor, and as it threw me to the floor, I grabbed my hand and I started hollering, "They shot me, boys," and they started running and scattering and going every which way because we wasn't prepared. There was no guns in the building, there was nothing in there and everything. But as I was laying on the floor there, and I was hollering at them boys that I was shot, I could hear other shots going. I mean, it was like it was shooting up a storm out through there, there's all kinds of shots going. And Tim said to me, Judy, show them that you can handle it. Show them that you're tough. That you're a coal miner, you can handle this, Don't let them get you down, And that just gave me the willpower that my heart, the more it hurt, the stronger I got, And I knew that if I just hang in there, that I could make it all the way, And every time I'd get scared and I'd want to go into a panic, I kept hearing Tim tell me, Judy, you're tough, you can handle this. Show them that you can handle this.
There were like attempts to kind of like be conciliatory or like look like they were being conciliatory, but Massey was actively trying to break up families at the time by going to union leadership and their families and offering like maybe a first cousin, a second cousin, a scabbing job.
Damn. I mean, you can't say these people aren't cruelly clever in their tactics.
No, exactly. And according to the miners who were on strike, these are tensions that still exist in the community. There are family members that like haven't spoken to each other in decades.
Sure.
Because like a cousin, a brother, or like an aunt and uncle cross the picket line.
Yeah.
And so if you think about this on like terms of counterinsurgency, being able to fracture such important community ties on the insurgency side is like, it kind of aligns perfectly with the counterinsurgency manual.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And it's effective. Again, like, you know, the more alienated we are, the more vulnerable we are. And that's what they're after.
So phase one is hearts and minds. Obviously, I think that, you know, the strikers saw through that. And then phase two is obviously you have like all of this scab work, like people willing to scab. They're bringing in state troopers, and then advanced security forces are brought in. And the tactics of plan or phase two, very interesting. So obviously you're working in an area where coal miners are very much still like armed. In some of the archival videos and photos, you can see images of wives, daughters carrying guns on the picket line or like protecting their homes because of the like both psychological and like actual warfare that is being waged on them during the strike.
You're allowed to have guns?
Right. Yes. In the state of Kentucky, you're allowed as long as they're not concealed.
Right.
You're allowed any kind of weapon as long as they're not hid.
And we intend on having plenty of them around.
We don't intend to sit here and be blown away. We don't intend to sit here and be caught unaware like we were before either.
We will do whatever it takes to defend ourselves, and we will return fire. And there's not a man or a lady here that won't do it. We're going to do it.
Just like kind of the toolbox of strategies that's brought in during phase two of the operation, it's like really insane. One of the things that advanced security forces did, well, I'm going to say allegedly here, was feed the scabs cocaine. Yeah. Like they would bring them in by the fucking truckload.
They got Mitch's staff. Stash, rather. Well, okay, this is crazy if this is true, because I'm immediately thinking about Iran-Contra and the relationships that like counterinsurgency forces had with, you know, drug production. And I mean, I'm not saying I hope it's true because it's.
I am going to say
I really hope
this
it is.
This is coming from I don't want to say allegations because he doesn't say the word allegations.
Sure.
But the leadership of the strike in an interview, it's a quite recent interview, we're talking about how the private security forces and the feds were kind of doping up these scabs in order to, and the point was to kind of like stoke conflict. And scabs already felt like they were being under attacked. There are a couple of interviews with people who scabbed who were like, oh, after this, I'm probably going to have to flee the country. I cannot stay in West Virginia because I will die.
I'm sorry, was this news to you, though, as a scab in that area? Like, have you seen these guys you're trying to scab against?
Yeah, no, exactly. So, you know, like, I wouldn't be surprised if the cocaine thing was true. It's it falls in line with the strategy of labor management forces to stoke, quote unquote, union violence.
Sure. And it gives it a very 80s
and this is
flair
also really
well.
a time where surveillance as captured by the camera becomes super, super important. Actually, one of my dissertation committee members said something that really stuck with me, in that I should understand surveillance of this type as part and parcel with psychological warfare.
Makes a lot of sense. Yes.
And
also,
Charles
this is kind of our second Foucault nod of the day, actually.
Yeah, I'm not anti-Foucault.
No.
A part of my concentration in my graduate program is to study the nature of surveillance.
Yes. What, are you not going to read Foucault then?
Whatever, we can talk about Foucault later.
Yeah,
but anyway,
sorry. Yeah.
Charles Vance is a really, like, he's a kind of a key figure in bringing the camcorder to every single strike in the labor management industry ethos. He writes a paper in an industry journal that emphasizes that every single strikebreaker or law enforcement personnel, private security should have a camera on them that is running at all times when they're on the picket line. And this is because he knows that the fight is on two fronts. You might not be able to win the battle on the ground at the work site, but if you have that camera, you are going to win the legal battle, because that's evidence of quote unquote union terrorism if you can, force strikers to engage in that kind of battle.
Yeah.
So strikers are like having to deal with constantly being surveilled, and they know they're being surveilled. Like, some of them describe that if their wife brought them a lunch on the picket line, immediately somebody from the company or a private security guard would come out with a camera and record and zoom in on everybody's faces. Yeah. Which is like, I can't imagine how difficult it is to be able to weather that kind of surveillance while you're trying to, fight for your right to live.
Yes. Yeah, this is very invasive.
And like on the other side of it, the strikers were, I think, quite clever in their ways to stop production. They would throw, I think they're called jack rocks. Do you know what that is?
Rocks.
It's like a caltrop.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. To stop coal trucks from leaving the work site and delivering coal. I think they counted up to like 1,700 damaged tires from the caltrops, which about 400 strikers who were engaged in this kind of fight were facing felony charges. None of them went to jail.
12th day of February 1985, you see a vehicle that is turned over, two vehicles that is turned over in the middle of the road. Apparently these strikers have done this.
There was a financial hit in the ways that like the strikers were able to disrupt production.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things that I wanted to focus on as an important strike strategy is that this is something that has to involve a whole community.
Right.
They were having a lot of like, I don't know what to call them. They're like events where you kind of sing and come together as a community to talk about the strike, which is super, super important in sustaining momentum. And it was really kind of like a full faith effort.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, there's also defensive elements involved in that kind of thing. I mean, this is how you keep eyes on each other, how you can work through affinity, how you spot interlopers and spies and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, exactly. The way that the strike is talked about in the Soldier of Fortune article, by my research so far, it matches up pretty well to what the strikers were experiencing. The description of how the counterinsurgency operation functioned was really interesting to me. Like, why the fuck were you assigning 2 Green Berets to every group of private security during the strike? What's that about?
They have nothing to
why
do.
Why is there
those
snipers?
Those guys have very little to do. The more I look up like Green Berets and Special Forces, like, okay, they'll have these moments where they do something absolutely horrible somewhere, but most of the time they're just like being Green Berets somewhere waiting for the fucking bomb to drop so that they can do their real job, Yeah. I guess it looks cool too. It's good for the Soldier of Fortune readers.
It's so cartoonish.
I mean, very. Very.
Yeah. And so by the end of the strike, I know we talked about was this like a success or was it not a success?
Well, we learned not to ask that, right? We learned to ask what happened and how do we move forward with those lessons?
Yeah. So by the end of the strike, Massey is not signed on to the BCOA, but they do get a different contract. I think largely there wasn't a huge number of people who were incarcerated or sent to jail, but there was this one instance that involved the death of a scab,
right?
Who was killed and allegedly by union members, and I think maybe 3 max ended up incarcerated for the death of the scab.
So apart from that, no deaths despite the incredible force brought by the company.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they really wanted to, like, in true neoliberal fashion, keep the fight in the courts. And the courts had ended up fining the miners like millions of dollars and issuing injunctions that said that they could no longer picket, or they could only keep pickets at a certain number of people.
Right.
Which is like the other part of the counterinsurgency operation, right? Like, if you're able to use the law to your advantage, which it already has been set up and kind of re-imbued with this anti-union nature, the private security forces and the labor management industry was really aware that if you put the fight to it, or if you encase the fight in the courts, it's much easier to win. And so on that front, I think that the strikers saw it as a huge weakening of the strike.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And that's actually very interesting too, because again, you've got all this bluster. Like you said, Green Berets are showing up. You have people that worked in Central America, the Middle East, Africa, and like they're Marine Corps guys, Vietnam vets, Secret Service dudes. They're building sniper nests. Yeah, I did find here.
Cars are being overturned and burned.
Yes.
People's houses are being shot at.
Yes.
Don Blankenship says, and he's still like, if you go into, allegedly, if you go into his office to this day, still has the TV that he says Union terrorists fired 11 shots into. And he like points at it and he's like, this is the violence I faced on strike.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, it's scary to be shot at, but fuck this guy. So
literally.
Also, I mean, there was shots. They would say that snipers were shooting armored vehicles that were brought in, but like, bro, you bring an armored vehicle in, it's there to get shot at. Like, there's a kind of a game being played too on the side of the counterinsurgency. Very provocative, you know.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that they did was, well, when the strikers had these car caravans to like kind of block the roads from, like, block coal trucks from leaving the coal site, private security would like smash in their windows, throw in tear gas into the cars.
Yeah.
As like a method to provoke quote unquote union violence, but also like these are things that you are seeing happening everywhere else in counterinsurgency operations in the third world. So I guess as I was reading up about counterinsurgency operations that were happening at the same time, I looked a lot at Nicaragua and Colombia and the fights over like workers' control of oil, especially.
Yes.
It's the same kind of deal. Like, just as violent, if not more.
And then literally some of the same guys. That's what's blowing my mind. I mean, it's probably some of these guys that are here in West Virginia in this moment, in this story.
Oh, absolutely. The Green Berets that are present in this moment draw from a lot of experience, like in Vietnam and anywhere in Central America, Philippines. It's the same people. Just like the comparison of the scenes in West Virginia to like Colombia were really, I don't know. I shouldn't be surprised, but I think like a lot of the general public doesn't understand just how violent this part of the United States is.
For real. Yes, it's really true. And I don't want to, exoticize it too much. I mean, like you can just fucking go there and hang out. It's fine. I learned to play stump out there, you know? It's like it's a normal place, but like capitalism hit this place like a bomb. And then, you know, in the 1920s, it literally dropped bombs on it. I mean, like this is when you go understand, you know, this has been and probably will be again a battlefield for class struggle.
Yeah. There's a strain of thought in Appalachian studies that I think that there are limits to its explanatory power, but the theory of Appalachia as a quote-unquote sacrifice zone for American imperialism and American capitalism, I think is a really useful analytic for understanding labor struggles. If you look at it as like an internal colony, obviously there's like theoretical issues with understanding any American as a part of like an internal colony, but the explanatory power in this kind of like framework is that it understands the resources of Appalachian people as something that is completely necessary for American capitalist hegemony.
Because there'll always be a need for us.
I mean, at face value, it rings pretty loudly, you know. I mean, even if you move further afield from the sort of labor studies field, you could also say the same of the racialization of the idea of the American. I mean, a lot of this also happens out here. I mean, you know, we're not that far from the Black Tobacco Wars that were like Klan-led. I mean, the reason why there's a West Virginia and not just a Virginia is because, you know, of the Civil War. You know, like this is a shatter zone in those ways, and it's been that way for a while. I think it's fair.
And I think it's also like analogous to a lot of the ways that other American colonies are just like colonies of the West in general, in that these companies are coming in and just destroying the environment.
Oh, true.
You're like through mountaintop removal, like water sources have been infinitely just desecrated by how poisonous coal mining is to the environment. And there really is just like resource extraction, you leave, and then these people are kind of left to fend for themselves.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, you really know how to pick your sites of research here. It's so rich, really.
It is. From
like a critical perspective, there's just endless kind of critical cracks that you could where's this metaphor going? Mine. There we go.
Yeah, and I think all of this is coming at a moment where there's a lot of renewed interest in the Massey strike. I'm seeing a lot more like public, it's public-facing work, like TV segments and like interviews about the strike.
Okay.
And I think it also comes as an answer to the call from a lot of historians that are asking like academia to interrogate the nature of how neoliberalism has impacted Appalachia as a whole. So it's like an exciting moment. I think there's a lot of work being done to bring to the public imagination the actual nature of radicalism in places like West Virginia. So very excited about that.
I also think for people that come into it with sort of a revolutionary left mindset, there's also a lot of things that are going to be hard to learn and hard to look at about these places. Like a lot of the Cold War psychological warfare worked out really well ultimately for the ruling class in America. And you know, there's some anecdote in here about some commie type guy showing up and getting run out of town. I think there was moments of this even back in probably the most radical period as far as like class consciousness with a political economic message goes, like in the 20s or whatever. Even then you had times where like the left agitators might be run out of town on the basis that we heard you're anti-religion. You know, that's kind of like basic stuff. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned here all the way around, and I'm really glad you're working on it. I suppose you've got probably a couple years ahead of you here of looking at this thing, huh? At least.
Honestly, I think like 2 years left max.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should probably get you back on when you're on the other end of this, because I don't know. I'm sure that you know, as this podcast also develops its own lore base and looks a lot into global insurgencies and, you know, trying to figure out when we're looking at something we want to call fascism, when we want to see it as imperialism, when, you know, neoliberalism does the job for us, that kind of thing. I'm not too caught up in that, but all of this is really helpful for wrapping our head around this horrible century we all just finished, and it looks like we're trying to get a redo on as we speak. So I guess before 20th century round 2 really picks up, it's good to know. It's good to know who our friends and enemies are. And
history is cyclical. I would love to come back and talk about this. I think especially because this project kind of sets me up for like my more long-term interest in like how parapolitics impacts labor.
Hell yes.
Yeah.
Listen, I remember a time in the U.S., and this is also, you know, you and I are both from the South, but there was a time not long ago where you wouldn't even hear the word capitalism be said, much less socialism communism, that kind of thing. I mean, it was one of these invisible words that maybe a politician might say as being like, we're the greatest country, blah, 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 capitalism. But you never hear somebody talk about, my day sucks because of capitalism. Now you can't not hear that, you know. The culture is shifting in some ways. I think that it probably does also maybe suggest a reason why you're seeing some of this Massey strike kind of coming back into public memory. I think that's probably good.
I think it's good too. And at risk of sounding, or at risk of affirming what I have been accused of by my advisors and professors in the past of being a vulgar Marxist. The contradictions are heightening, my friend.
Do you know my other favorite vulgar Marxist on this show? I love collecting them. We need him.
He's a huge probably influence on me and how I talk about politics. So
Legend.
Yeah.
All right, Ashley, anything you want to add on the end here? Anything we might have forgotten or you want to sort of press the point on before we wrap up?
Well, first I'd like to say, thank you for kind of giving me this platform to think through and talk about something that is really important to me and something that I hope will be really useful for the American labor movement. And big fan of the pod. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
And Ashley and Nick from last week's episode have both provisionally agreed, if I can pull together the dates and stuff, to come back on and receive questions and comments from you guys, listeners. And this is especially relevant to our patrons who can actually join that conversation live and participate in the chat and all that. But if you want to know when that's going to happen, well, I do too. I think Ashley would like to know as well. And certainly Nick would too. But that will be up on the Patreon, and I'll try to do some wider posting on that too. So go to patreon.com/thestateBetweenUs to stay up to date on that kind of thing. And I guess that's it. So Ashley, until I see you again, and we sort of you had some more time to mull this over, and then I expect you to come back with a unified theory of class, race, and counterinsurgency, regional divisions of capital accumulation, and maybe lead the capital reading group, and I think we'll be good. Can you do all that?
Yeah, it's all light work. I can do all of that.
Easy stuff. All right.
I'm already underpaid anyway.
Right. I can help that. I can pay you even less. Nothing, in fact. Taft-Hartley, baby. That's what we do here. All right.
Okay, lovely. And then I guess now cue the ending song.
In days of old, when knights were bold and chivalry was great, a knight would slay a dragon and he'd win a lady's hand. Then half a kingdom he would own and all its riches there, and they would live so happily, he and his lady fair. Then all the dragons disappeared, and with them went our fears. No one has seen a dragon now for several hundred years. And in their absence we forgot, we became so weak. And now a dragon raised his ugly head in Yellow Creek. He did not come a breathing fire for everyone to see. He was so subtle in his ways, he caught us in our sleep. We finally woke to find him there, his strength beyond belief. Now untold damage has been done, Black Death is in our creek. And now we have no knight in shining armor on our side, just a Yellow Creek concerned citizens to carry on the fight. Oh, how I wish our dragon were the fire-breathing kind. If he was, we'd shoot him dead in hell, and that's the bottom line. But we cannot engage him in an outright free-for-all. So we'll keep digging underneath and hope someday he'll fall. I know I may not be the one who finally slays the dragon. It's just knowing the SOB's gonna die that starts my tail wagging.